I have to say, it's very strange seeing you outside of Newport Harbor to begin with. I mean, who would have thought a principal had a life outside of principaling?
I know. When you see a staff member at a grocery store, God forbid, right?
How did graduation go?
It was almost spiritual. It was spiritual in a lot of ways. Not having it last year, everything that these seniors have gone through, you're going to get a couple more years where you'll have experiences like rallies and football games where you have a lot of the student body and dances and, everybody back on campus. But the fact is that senior lunch on Tuesday and then grad rehearsal on Tuesday was the first time we saw cohort C students in over a year.
Oh my God.
And then we found out, I met one senior who just moved in to our school in November, but stayed in cohort C, so he knew nobody.
Oh my God.
I know. And so you start thinking about all that isolation, and then all of a sudden you're thrust together like we were for graduation rehearsal, graduation lunch, and then graduation itself. I thought the speeches were phenomenal. The two student speeches were great. Dr. Nas was great. I don't know. It was an amazing day.
That's a point I wanted to bring up. Is one of the things I really, really respect and admire is the fact that you don't just give the speeches to the valedictorian or the ASB president. You make them audition, and anyone can get it. Why do you do that?
Correct. I think it speaks to our core values, the most cherished values at our school, that we treat every student equally. And that's what we try and do day in and day out at Harvard, that every student has the opportunity to succeed. And we want to give every student that opportunity. And it goes all the way from freshman year to, we've limited the amount of honors classes because we want all students to have a similar landing spot, to rehearsing for the graduation speeches.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with that, because I was talking to someone the other day. I work at an ice cream shop, and she said that only the ASB president and the valedictorian get to make a speech. And I sat there and I was like, yeah, but I'm sure some ASB presidents and some valedictorians represent the entire student body, but a lot of the times that's not true. There's a lot of voices out there that wouldn't normally be heard. And it seems like you try to hear all those voices.
We do. And there's a lot of, as you well know, and every time, it doesn't matter if it's our accreditation agency, which is, Western Association of Schools and Colleges, or, we have some new school board members that are fantastic. I remember a couple of years ago, Mr. Lee Sung, our superintendent, was at our graduation, and he could not believe the diversity. We are a microcosm of this country. We really are. And it's all on one campus in Newport Harbor. And that's the magic of the school. That's the strength of the school. And, you want every student, no matter what walk of life, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, background, to have an equal opportunity.
Mm-hmm. You seem like a natural born leader. I mean,
thank you, Emmett. That's a great compliment, and I appreciate that compliment. I think that a combination of life experiences more than anything, mm-hmm. and having met, and I'm a big fan of your family, as you well know. The thing that I really appreciate about your father is I think that he has given both his sons room to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think whether you're a parent or a mom or a dad or an educator, you have to give kids the room to grow. You have to let your staff make mistakes, and when they succeed, applaud them. When they fail, you're there to pick them up. You're not there to shame or blame or judge them. And with students too. And there's no magic. A lot of people try and, I think, make education, especially public education, too complicated. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't need to be complicated. I think, love, tolerance, equity, equality, just treating people right, and then expecting the best out of everybody is all you can really, that's all you really need.
Mm-hmm. As an educator yourself, do you see any standout flaws with the public education system?
I do. I've always been very critical of the standardized testing that we have to go through every year. I understand why we do it. Mm-hmm. There is value to it, mm-hmm. but I don't think the volume and the frequency of it is necessary. I think really what you need, the great thing about California is they've come up with a new college career index that I think is solid. It's not based on 2 test scores like it was in the past. It values students that go to community college, the military, or they make a career out of their high school experience. You know, we have the 4 career technical education pathways at Harbor, and they can go off into the workforce, and you are applauded for that. And when you're ranked, profiled, and sorted by the state, they actually take that into consideration. The students that complete your career technical education pathways, students that go to the military. And of course, there is testing woven within it, but it's just the money that is spent on testing. I would rather spend that money on schools, on students, whatever, you know, whether it's enhancing our facilities or lowering some freshman class sizes that I think are critical to lower, like English and math. I would rather see our money spent there. That's the big bane, I think, of public education, is the volume of testing we have to go through.
Yeah, that's it's something that I don't want to stand on my soapbox and be that guy, but I always got annoyed about the idea of someone's entire future could be based off of testing. And now that doesn't mean, like, if a teacher, someone tried to explain the reason we do state testing to me, and they were like, if we the schools that perform well in the state testing get better funding. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, but if it's a lower income area, if I was a teacher in a lower income area, my goal wouldn't be to help them pass a test. It would be to help them learn the best way possible. So if those schools aren't passing these tests, they're not going to get the right funding. That it baffles me.
No. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the old system across the country, and each state adopted their own metric and had their own system that varied from state to state. But basically, schools that are in low socioeconomic areas that were labeled program improvement, low performing. Can you imagine? You're already living under the poverty level. You already have to live in a community that sometimes is riddled with crime, with homeless or housing insecurity, homelessness. And then, you know, you have a lot of families in those inner cities that try and change the trajectory of their future. And they do that through their children and schooling. Education is the key. But, you know, your child's going to a low performing, underperforming school. You're already, you know, labeled as such. And then you have to rise above it. You have to have teachers that are willing to teach in that environment and be subjected to the penalties year in and year out. And that's the way it worked for years. And there is no coming out from underneath it. Very few schools did. There is a way to game any system that's put in place, and some schools did game it. You found across the country, a lot of schools were actually cheating. There were an exorbitant amount of eraser marks on the Scantron sheets before they submitted the tests. And eventually it just fizzled with the shift to Common Core, which is now the standard level of education, the standard framework that we go by. There isn't that sort of penalty system in place yet. My fear is we go back to it. I have enjoyed the last few years where standardized testing isn't the end all be all. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I want to see students go to college, go to community college, go into the workforce, go into the military. And if we're judged by that, so be it. I think that's fantastic. And there needs to be a balance, because I want to be held accountable. Our teachers want to be held accountable. We all need to be held accountable. And there has to be some common sense system in place. But you're absolutely right. There's just, the whole system is arranged in a way that it just hurts the low socioeconomic schools the most.
Yeah, because I think, like, a really good teacher, you get a really good teacher, you're like, screw Common Core, I just want to learn from this person's mouth. But the problem is there's a lot of not really good teachers. And when I say that, I don't mean they're not educated. I just mean they're not trying, their main objective isn't to just help that student or help as many students as they can grow. And I feel like that's why I started this podcast and called it Homeroom. I feel like learning should be the most exciting thing possible. And the fact that it's a chore to a lot of us, I mean, I'm including myself. Sometimes, a lot of the time, I'm like, I don't want to go to school. And that should never be a sentence out of someone's mouth. I mean, how do you think we solve that or can approach that?
You know, I would like to ask you that question too. I'll answer it first, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about it as well, because I'm constantly wondering how to overcome that and how to eliminate the boredom of school. And the reality is that we have a lot of students that are disconnected from school for one reason or another. I don't think we offer enough. We offer so much at Newport Harbor High School, but I still think with that, it's not enough. And you look at schools in low socioeconomic areas, they don't have the level of programming we do or the quality of programming, because we have so many parents that support our programs. We have a district that's well funded. We have civically minded board members that really care about our schools. But I think that the emphasis on college is the one thing, you know, it's like for years, it was, if you're not going to college, you're labeled as a loser. And I think that is so dangerous. And it's so wrong for so many different reasons. And you just check boxes, 3 years of Spanish, 4 years of math, 4 years of English, and have to take my visual performing art. I think if we eliminate that and we provide other courses for students, like welding, like construction technology, like, we could start pilot lessons, right? Scuba diving, whatever it may be. I think that is very healthy for a public high school, especially a comprehensive public high school. And to eliminate this notion, it's all about the sweatshirt brand, right? It's all about, I can wear my Stanford sweatshirt my senior year because I got in. And that's bad. And we've got to get away from that. And I think the standard has gotten so high to get into these elite colleges, the top 60 schools in the country, that we're trying to funnel all these students into that narrow bottleneck. That is not a good place to be. And we need to applaud. And that's why at graduation, we always applaud the community college, the career technical education kids, the kids that go to the military stand up and we recognize them. You have got to get away from 4 years or bust, right? The 4-year college mentality, or I'm a loser.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating that you say that, because one of the first people to come on the show that has said not that college isn't necessarily the end all be all is a principal at a high school. Because I'm not going to go to college. I might after 2 or 3 years of trying acting, because as soon as I get out of high school, I look at it like, look, college will always be there, but I won't always be 18. I won't always be 19. I won't always be 20. That's a golden period that I think I know I want to capitalize on as much as I can. And the hard thing for me is I see this from a different perspective, I feel like, than a lot of other students. And that's why it aggravates me, because I made this decision thinking I don't necessarily care that there's a system that everyone's following this one track. I don't want to follow that track. And I feel like, to answer, you said you kind of wanted my opinion on it.
I do.
I found a passion at a young age, a passion being, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and there's nothing that anyone's going to say to stop me. And I found that freshman year of high school.
I applaud that.
And I don't know how to explain it. I did. And there's two sides to it. Before you find a passion, it's hard to be interested in anything. And then after you find a passion, it's hard to be interested in anything besides that passion. And so I feel like there's two different mindsets. And then there's also a ton of hormones racing through us all, because we are high schoolers, so we're going to be bored no matter what at times.
Right.
But I feel like trying to find your passion is a very hard process. It either happens or it doesn't. And just checking boxes, like you said, isn't going to get that student there. But I feel like providing all these different opportunities, like welding, like military service not being a negative or frowned upon option, I think is a crucial and amazing goal that you have.
And I would love to see our district transform itself in the next decade and move towards that. And I know there's a lot of conversation about it, but I applaud you on it. I think it is so healthy not going to college for 2 and 3 years, maybe even more, and just pursuing your passion and seeing where it takes you. Yeah. And there's a number of things you can do in the entertainment industry that you're suited for, that your gifts, your passion, your intellect lead you towards, and you don't need a formal education beyond high school to be successful in that field. And so you going for it is one thing that needs to be highlighted more in our society. I'm glad you're doing this podcast, because maybe you can take that vein sometimes and then really champion that topic of students that don't want to go to college and what their goals are beyond high school and what their next steps are beyond high school. I think, hypothetically, if you move to LA and you're trying acting for 2-3 years, just go for it. I mean, what an experience. Yeah. You will probably learn more in those 2-3 years than some that are paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to go to a 4-year school.
And I feel like not everybody, but I feel like for a lot of people, I know some very close family members that have gone through that path, that everyone says you need to go through that path. And people say it's scary when you get out of high school, because if you don't go to college, you have to face the world. Well, newsflash, when you get out of your 4-year cushy university, you're going to have to face the world. So I feel like if you're in the mindset to want to just get out there and start something after high school, you should do that. Might be scary, you might screw up, but I mean, I can only talk from behind the train. I'm not there yet. I haven't gone through this, but that's how I see it, and that's what you're saying makes so much sense to me.
I mean, look how many successful people didn't go to a 4-year school, and the other data set that parents need to really look at is the high school or the college dropout rate, especially the freshman year. And if you just Google freshman year college dropout rate in the United States, you will be shocked at some of the schools and the dropout rates that they have. And the elite schools like Harvard, SC, Stanford, no, they don't have the high dropout rates that some do, but there are some schools on that list that would shock you. The college dropout rate on average is about 35% across the country. So that means 3 to 4 students that go off to a 4-year drop out in that first year. Now that doesn't calculate the second and third year where there is more dropout rate, but or higher. There are dropouts at that stage of college as well. But that's the secret of community college, and a lot of students that don't get into their dream school, I talk to them about going to community college for a year because those seats exist the sophomore and junior year of that class. And so if you're the class of 2025, which this class is for college, well, don't just focus on next year. If you don't get into your UCLA, your SC, or your Ivy League school or Michigan, well, don't worry too much. Go to community college, get on the advanced track there, and then transfer. And your diploma is going to say Stanford, Michigan, SC. It's just that you spent a year in community college, and really, who cares? And I know that the counter argument to that is that a lot of parents want their students to have, or I should say society thinks that freshmen should have a certain experience. That first, just like freshman year of high school, right? You probably remember the first week like it was yesterday. It was just bigger. There were adults walking around. I think that a lot of people want that freshman experience, but you get it your sophomore year. It's just delayed a year. And just like you going into acting and delaying your college career, even if you don't have one, you're delaying it for 2-3 years. It's okay. It's still going to be there, right? You said it. It's still going to be there.
Let me ask you something. How does one decide that they want to become a high school principal? I cannot imagine ever coming to that conclusion. How did that happen for you?
You know, Emmett, that's another great question. There are about 75 high school principals in Orange County, and it's like a club. It really, really is. And we get together every 2 years because we have to sort and re-league the athletic conferences and leagues throughout Orange County. There's, 10, 12 athletic leagues and conferences. There's the 75 high schools. There is no other job like it. There are so many moving pieces and so many layers to being a high school principal. It's actually incredible, and nothing prepares you for it until you get on the job and you sit in the seat and you just go. And I always knew I wanted to be a principal because I had some great principals growing up. The first time I thought about it was probably in the 5th and 6th grade when Mr. Haley was our principal at Oak Elementary School. And he wrote this weekly news bulletin called Haley's Comments, right? Like Haley's Comment. And I just thought that was so neat. And he was such a presence on campus, and he was funny. I just think you can shaping the culture of an institution like a public school is a difficult one, yet it's a privilege to do. And I woke up one day in college and thought I need to teach, because I was in college and we were doing a lot of community outreach in college at low socioeconomic schools. And this is in the southwest corner of Missouri. And where my college was, there was quite a bit of poverty in the neighborhood. And so just mentoring and tutoring and coaching some of the junior high kids at the junior high near our college was just fantastic. And that's when I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Then when I started teaching, I had some great principals that I worked for. And I just thought, I can do this. I want to do it. I want to be, like Michael Jordan. I want to be like Mike, right? I want to be like that principal. I've also, conversely, I've seen some principals that are just terrible, and I've learned a lot from them about what not to do, as well as some of my bosses and supervisors. I've had great bosses and supervisors. I've had really tenuous and tedious ones, and it just shapes you. But I think that, if you believe in reincarnation and human beings have multiple lives, I think you have one life cycle as being a high school principal, because it is just exhausting.
You seem like, and I've noticed this about you since my whole time at Harbor, only have 1 year left, but you seem like you really, really care about the individual. But as a high school principal, like you said, you've got this whole big picture to look at. So how do you not lose sight of one versus the other?
It's hard. And that's another great question, because, your programs and your pathways and everything that you offer may not be right for that one individual. And that gets back to your critical question about the boredom in school. And so, for example, the graduating class of 2021 was a huge class when they started ninth grade. They were about 675 students in that ninth grade cohort. Now, I understand people move. I understand that people, because of job, career, because of money, they move, right? And so you have an attrition because of movement. But then you also have attrition because of boredom, because of lack of academic achievement, because of behavior, because of substance abuse or some other dynamic going on at home. And this class graduated with about 570. So that means we lost about 100 students along the way. So of those 100 students, I would say 80 did not move out of our Newport Mesa attendance area. They either finished at continuation school, adult school, or they dropped out. Now, what went wrong there, right? And that goes back to your question about the individual. How do you care about the individual? You have to think of every individual. And that's why I think that we need more programming at high school to speak to the different passions and needs. As the school as a whole, you have these overarching goals. Our overarching goals are instruction, inclusion, zone articulation. We want to know exactly what our feeder schools are doing, what they're up to, what they're teaching. and then our tiered intervention plan, right? Those are very simple, defined 4 goals. And then we have our most cherished values, sailor pride. I know in the announcements, people get tired of listening to scholarly, artistic, interconnected, leader, but we want students to exude that when they leave. We want them to embody all those values when they leave. So as a school, you think about your goals and you think about your most cherished values, and that drives all your work as a school, where your money's spent, what classes you offer, who you hire. We vet out people we hire very carefully because we want those people that are going to buy into what we're doing. And then it comes down to the individuals. And again, you have thankfully found a place with Mr. Diaquino, our drama department, and everything we're doing there. He's done a great job, by the way. But yet, your question just hits home, because there are students that are just flat out bored, that are barely hanging on, that have dropped out, and I want to know why. And tapping into that why is critical. Sometimes people don't want to hear it. And I think that we now have I know we have a school board that's always cared about it. We really have a school board now that cares about the why students are disengaged, and what do we do about it?
I mean, I feel like that's why COVID, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that on YouTube. It probably will get taken down. I don't really care though. I feel like that's why that hit so hard and was very difficult for a lot of students, because to be honest, I feel like a lot of students aren't necessarily there for the education. That's not what draws them. How many athletes only go to school because that's the one time a day they feel like they're doing something they're proud of doing. I know I was very disinterested because there was no plays or anything to do. And I was sitting there doing monologues in my room and being like, I'm bored of doing this by myself. And when that's taken away, now there's only such a small group of people that are really there because they really care about math. They really care about math. So they're going to go on Zoom every day because they're excited to see Mr. Clay and bust their ass in math class. I went, but I was not that very excited to be there. And it goes back to trying to find that purpose. And that's, I created this the tagline of being better. You just got to be yourself, but be better. But in order to do that, you got to figure out who you are, right? You gotta, it's so hard from your perspective, because I mean, in life, why do people give up on life? Why do people quit their job? They don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel like what they're doing is worth their time. They don't find enjoyment. What are they living for, right? And it's the same thing on a smaller level in high school. Not to say you're God, but on a smaller level in high school, what am I doing here? Or you sit there looking at the chalkboard and you're learning about fish and the Mariana Trench, and you're like, I don't care. I don't care that after there's an atom, there's something smaller. I don't care. This is a table. That's what I know. After that, I don't care.
We just threw chemistry and marine science under the bus, and good job there.
I don't like science. I never did. I can do math, I can do writing, but science is just, my point is, like, writing, I love to write. When I get into English class, if you can ask any of the English teachers I've had, I'm sure they'll say Emmett was quite the character, but he wrote his heart out. Right. But if I imagined how I feel about science, if I felt that way about every single class, yeah, I don't know if I'd want to go to school.
So it goes back to the original, some of the conversation at the beginning of this podcast, in the sense that, how do you balance accountability and enrichment and flexibility and freedom in the pathways at school? Because you have found, again, drama, you love to write, you can do math. So what if we say, you know what, you don't need science? What are the optics there in society, right? Because I'm sure you've heard STEM for years, right? Mm-hmm. Science, technology, engineering, math. I mean, that's been the buzz for the last 4 or 5 years. Well, not every student's excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. And we don't champion the humanities enough. What's interesting is pre-COVID, we used to have a valedictorian dinner. So the valedictorians of Corona Del Mar, Harbor, and Sage Hill, which is the private school in Newport Beach, the Commodore Club in the city of Newport used to put on a valedictorian dinner, and they're going to in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And they put the top athletes up as well. I think your brother was a scholar athlete, or one of the athletes that was invited to the dinner. Anyway, at the end of the dinner, there's one person on the Commodore Club that counts, because you highlight the student's major, or at least what they want to major in college. And it's always engineering, finance, business, engineering, finance, business. You rarely hear a student say English, drama, right? I'm going to college to study, I'm going to Harvard to study theater, right? You don't hear that in the valedictorian dinner. And then it kind of trickles down to, okay, where's the money in our society? Well, it's in computer engineering, it's in finance, it's in, right? And so it's in medicine. There's some students that say pre-med. So going back to high school, is it okay if we tell a student, because it is in most post-industrial countries, when you're 16, you know what? You can decide for yourself in school, you don't need these classes. I'm not taking any more science and math, right? Is that okay? And so now, you know, you've kind of handed the responsibility of the future of education, of choice, over to a student and say, I don't want to do it. You take off the controls. Because right now we're trying to get every student to do at least 3 years of a world language, 3 years of a science, 3 years of math, right? The only thing you really have to do 4 years of is English. You have to pass Algebra 1 to graduate. We would like you to take at least something past chemistry. But do we need it?
That's where you get into some shaky water, because as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I and this is on a bigger spectrum, but I didn't need to take calculus. After the first week, I was like, I don't want to take calculus. But I was like, you know what? I feel like kind of the point for me of taking math all through high school is to show that I could do something I didn't want to do the whole time. And I feel like not everyone thinks like me. So maybe at 16 years old, they're just thinking about how they want to go home and play Fortnite. I'm not saying to put anyone down, but when you're thinking like that at 16 years old, not everyone has that passion or has that goal. So to give them the opportunity, the option, they might make a decision they regret, and they're being taken away that you have to buck up and do some things you don't necessarily want to do. That's what life's going to be like. And I've tried to find symbols in all my classes to motivate me to go to them. Like English, I naturally loved, but I mean, if you walk away from English thinking there's no point to write an essay, and Socratic seminar sucked, you miss the point. Like, you have to learn that in order to make a claim, you should back it up with evidence. That's as simple as an essay should be. In order to make an argument, you need to provide reasoning. And if I feel like these little micro lessons, if you can't take away the big picture, or like you don't find a love in that subject, try to find a micro lesson, right? I think you kind of froze.
Yeah, you got me now?
Yep, you're back.
Yeah, you're right. And so what you're talking about is, where does that responsibility begins and ends? Because you don't want students to go home and play Fortnite.
Right.
I think that students need to be enrolled in at least 5 to 6 classes. You need to be enrolled in 6 classes up to your junior year, 5 classes your senior year. So if you're not taking science and math your sophomore, junior year, then you better be taking something else that's going to enrich your life. And that's where that balance is. So, you know, the symbolic journey of being in school, you have to commit to the time, commit your energy to doing that, is there. And but you're not taking the classes that you have absolutely no interest in, like Mariana's Trench and Fish, right?
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Johnston, but it didn't click.
I don't think he would be offended by that comment. I've had enough conversations with him to know that we're on the same page with this topic that we're discussing.
Uh-huh. Where do you see this goal of yours going in the long run? Because I'm sure you've got short-term plans to how to integrate it, but what's your, if you were like king of the education and what you said happened, how would you approach the education system currently?
Well, I think I think our Newport Mesa can be the model for the state in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of differing opinions. I don't even agree with the principal colleagues that I work with. That's what makes work so exciting. I have a tremendous amount of respect for all my secondary principal colleagues. We don't always see eye to eye on some things and matters, but I think we definitely need a ROTC program. We need an established military program on all. I would venture to say all our campuses. Each campus has a different branch of the military on them. And then, we naturally can be the Navy because we're the sailors and so forth. But you also need to engage the Harbor Boulevard of cars. There's, Ford and Toyota and Chevrolet. We need an auto shop program. We definitely need a robust relationship with Orange Coast College. And so you can start taking junior college courses your junior year of high school. And it counts for high school and for college credit and GPA. I would love to see us partner with the Los Angeles Chargers on some level. We have an NFL team in Costa Mesa. They need a bigger presence in our schools and to somehow lure them in more. Mm-hmm. We have a major airport in John Wayne. Can we, do aviation courses and classes there? We have Hoag Hospital in our backyard. We have a harbor in our backyard, and all sorts of everything from the mechanics of a diesel engine to how do you repair a sail? How do you repair a fiberglass hull? How do you, all those things that we really don't have. How do you partner with different companies in the harbor that are shipyards, right? That deal with boat repair? How do you partner with an NFL team and all the different careers that NFL teams offer, from coaching to public information to medicine? South Coast Plaza, look at all the different businesses in each South Coast Plaza and in Fashion Island, from clothing to food. How do you partner with them to enrich our schools? And so, if I were king for a day, I would partner with everybody so that students come in, they have so many different options. You've got South Coast Repertory, you've got the Performing Arts Center, you've got that little theater on Cliff Drive that we really don't do much with, and how do you partner with all these different agencies and professionals to enhance the high school experience? And that would be my dream.
Yeah, to expose students to the outside world as much as possible to see if they want to continue education or want to find something and want to continue education towards something they actually know where they want to go to.
Right.
I mean, it's hard. My brother exposed to me that there's these whole other little cocoons of careers that you don't even think of. Like, I didn't know what a merchant marine was. Like he put it, I talked to him the other day. The UPS driver of the military or of the boats. I mean, they're just the middlemen. Like, you don't even think of that. All the different jobs underneath the football players. There's all these. It's like a tree with all the roots, right? There's all these roots, and you just. When I say you, I mean me and probably many of the other students and people in the world. You don't think of these little jobs like being an underground welder. I'm sure they make a lot of money, but no one even thinks of it.
Right. They do. I mean, underwater welders make over $100 an hour, and there's a huge need in California because of the oil rigs, salvaging boats that sink or planes that crash. I mean, there's just, I don't know. And again, getting back to it is, I think we need more offerings. We need more options, especially after the sophomore year for students, because they can start deciding for themselves. I mean, by the time you're 16 and you're driving a car, you should be able to choose which pathway you want to go, but remain in school, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not just taking 3-4 classes and going home and playing Fortnite. That really resonates with me, because we have students that game the system trying to do that, right? They just want to go and do their thing. And I think there needs to be that healthy balance.
Mm.
And how do you partner with, OCC and UCI and the LA Chargers and Hoag Hospital and Harbor Boulevard of Cars? I think that all that's very, very possible to really make sure that students find some sort of passion in school, so they're not wasting their time, and then they make the right choice after, and they're not just floating.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that these other career paths, or the military, the anything really outside of the 4-year career college path, why do you think those have become something people frown upon versus college being this high pedestal?
That's another, I mean, that's the central question. And it is so, there's no simple answer for a complex question like that, because it's woven within, I think, status. It's woven within what people perceive as success. It's okay for the neighbor's kid to be a plumber, but not my kid. I mean, that's what it kind of boils down to, right?
Mm.
I think it's great that kids go into career technical education fields, but not for my kid. I don't want my kid coming home dirty, smelly, dirty hands, all that stuff. There has been a stigma that's been attached to it. And I do think the other reality of it is woven a little bit within, not a little bit, but a lot within race relations in this country. And so you have, a growing minority population that has filled those roles. And for Caucasians, for white people, those aren't white places or spaces anymore. And I think that is one element of it, that, to be a certain profession in our society, it's perceived that ethnicity is doing that role or doing that job. And that's where it gets really bad. When you start thinking like that is just so warped, that line of thinking. Because, I although I did a DNA test about 4 years ago and I found out that I have lots of ethnicities in me, I do pass as white. I would, and my kids are white. They're considered Caucasian, and, blonde hair, blue eyes, all that stuff. I would love if my son or daughter, I would champion it if they didn't go to college and they wanted to do welding or plumbing or auto mechanic. I think it's a great, great field. It's a great job. So and again, to sum it up, I think it's woven within status, within what people perceive as success and what people perceive as, in some circles, when there's that implicit bias or that explicit bias that exists within some circles in our society, that it's not that person's job. I think that, in the last year, especially, we've had a social racial awakening in our society that have made people think and rethink. And especially at Newport Harbor in the last 5 years, we've undergone an upheaval of political, social, and racial awakening in a lot of ways. We've had a surge in that, which I think is very, very healthy. And and I'm sure you see it as a student, right? Just a lot of stuff out there. And people's perceptions when it comes to race and ethnicity is that it's not my son's job to do, because, that is for another ethnicity to do. And again, I think that all that is part of this complex equation. When you start thinking, when it goes back to success is driven by what college I go to. Now, with all that said, I do believe, and I've had a number of conversations with Mrs. Newman, who's one of a handful of African-American teachers in our district. And she's in charge of our AVID program. And there are a lot of Hispanic Latino students in our AVID program. And we also have a healthy balance of Caucasian and Asian students in our AVID program. But a majority of the need in AVID is with our Hispanic Latino community. And what Mrs. Newman does is she finds the money, so money doesn't become a barrier for college. I've had this conversation with her where a person of color, their trajectory in life is severely accelerated and advanced if they go to college, because it's a lot easier for a white person to enter a career technical education field or a hands-on job than it is a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is all woven within the complexity of that question, Emmett. And her argument is, which I agree with, is that a person of color should go to college too, and even if after college they go into a mechanical field, a hands-on job, they will be exponentially more successful because of the college experience and because of that degree than a white person. And again, there are people that disagree with that, and I've listened to the counter argument of that, and we've discussed that in our leadership team meetings and our administrative meetings at the district office. And especially now in our society where it's so polarized, where it runs along racial, political, and social lines, I think that people perceive college as the gateway to a better life, and I think that's a false narrative.
Mm-hmm. It's only a gateway to a better life if you know what's on the other side of that gate.
Correct.
Right? Do you find it difficult to you have you're so passionate about this. I can hear it, I can see it, and I can tell you want to make that impact. But do you find it difficult trying to connect and working with students, high schoolers, kids? I mean, because I'm a high schooler myself, and I couldn't imagine spending over 4 years with high schoolers. So how do you break that barrier, unless you don't have a barrier in the first place?
I'm the Prince of Pal, right? I'm everybody's pal.
It's great.
It's hard. It's really hard. And, you have to break it down. And I think, and Emmett, I think you would agree with this statement. I think teenagers can spot a phony a mile away. If you're a phony and you're fake and you pretend like you care about kids and all that, teenagers smell that very.
Because teenagers do it to each other all day, every day. Yeah. They have to figure that out, or else they're going to get. Whew.
Yes, and there's certain interviews I've been in, and I sit across the table thinking, why are you entering education? You really don't care about kids, let alone the subject you want to teach, and you're going to get eaten up alive at Newport Harbor. But you got to get down on a student's level in a professional way. There are lines that I will not cross, but you've got to find a way to get down to a student's level, identify with them, relate to them, show them that you really genuinely care about their life and support them.
It's a lot harder than it sounds. I mean, because I feel like that's a problem most teachers face. I mean, that's why they can't get through to students, or that's why their I listened to Neil deGrasse Tyson on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I feel like listening to him talk about education, it's very similar to what you're saying, because when you think about it, he made astrophysics cool. Like no one cared about space before Neil deGrasse Tyson started, because when he talks about it, he's like, never should a teacher say the student just refuses to learn, because that reflects on the teacher, not the student. It's not the student refuses to learn, it's you haven't found the way to connect to them. But on the other side of that, teachers are dealing with 8 classes a day of 30 some students. So how do you connect to every student while also getting what you need to get done? I mean, to everyone, it's so simple until you really think about it, right?
Oh yeah, it's extremely difficult. And typically a teacher has 180 students on their caseload. If they're teaching 7 classes, they've got 210 students on their caseload, and it's just really difficult to get to know them. That's also why I'm a big fan of the co-curricular, music, dance, choir, drama, all the athletic teams we have, the clubs, is that the club advisors, the coaches, the directors, the coordinators, AVID and IB included, they get to know students on a micro level, and they get to know students on a deeper level than if you're just a classroom teacher or just a principal, right? Mr. Diakino knows you better than anybody on the campus because he spends more time with you. I think the stage lends itself to a different environment in the classroom where everybody can let their guard down a little bit, because you have to, and it's the same in sport. To get the best out of everybody, you've got to kind of be vulnerable and be willing to be criticized, yet built back up and complimented and all that stuff. And I think that environment just is more conducive. So that's why I think in high schools, there's been an argument about getting rid of all that, because there's certain European countries that don't have it. Australia doesn't have it. They don't have drama, music, dance, choir, athletics. I think that's not a good thing. I think the beauty of American high school is we have that. Students connect to those programs, and we find out more about them and how to help them and how to drive them from those programs than anything else.
Yeah. I mean, because on the East Coast, I used to live in New Jersey, right? And I still keep in contact with a couple of my friends. All the sports are extracurricular. They're not part of your course load. And I just realized that we do that. And I just remembered. And because you're so right. Like, I feel like even if you don't like sports, you should try sports, because there's no feeling like I played sports all up until the end of sophomore year when I switched into full blown into acting. There's no feeling like being in the locker room with your team, or being on the bus after a win, or being on the bus after a loss. You don't feel that anywhere else. And you might never feel that if you don't try doing sports. And since you make that a class, I see what you're doing. Was that like your decision, or was that on the district level?
No, that's on a district level. I think, our community's expectation is, and again, the local education agencies in California are all governed by school boards. Our school board members are elected by people in Newport Mesa. They want to see all that. And I just think that on the West Coast, it's still alive and well, and it's always going to be part of what we do.
Yeah. Can I get a Go Sailors for the closing?
As always, go Sailors.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Homeroom. Dr. Boulton, I really do appreciate you coming on. This was a great interview. I love to learn. I just love to learn. So having you on made my day.
Emmett, I hope you have a great summer. Stay in touch. And then don't forget, when you win an Oscar, okay, all I want is an invitation to one of those Oscar after parties. I just want to see all the stars, and I don't want to sit through the show. I don't want to go on the red carpet. I don't need a ticket to the Oscar. I just want to see. I'll watch you get an Oscar on TV, and then we're gonna go to and they're gonna have me at your after party.
Yeah, okay? Take you to the after party. All right, that sounds good, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you like
Beverly Hills.
Yes, I'll make that happen. I'll remember this. Send me an email. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment down below if you have someone you think I should have on the podcast next. I hope you learned. I hope you go out there and you keep asking those questions, because that's the only way we can grow. That's the only way we can be ourselves, but be better. Class dismissed. All right.